My name is Chris Ford, and a lot of you are here for real estate, and I forgot to get a sign-in sheet, so if you can, come and see me sometime afterwards so I can remember your face. But we have the great pleasure of having Chad McWhinney. His brother Troy was here last night as part of the entrepreneur experience with Jay Jazz. I'm very excited to hear his story. I've heard bits and pieces of it. At lunch today, we had an opportunity to kind of get a little bit of an understanding of how they got started. Most of you know that the McWhinneys developed a lot of it from Centera. They did it in the news for a variety of different reasons. On Monday, because of a new apartment complex. On Tuesday, because of potential foreclosure. Chad's going to provide some insight on all of that. So we're excited to have him, and it's a good opportunity to go ahead and learn something from really an entrepreneur. And if you want to let him know about questions or anything else, we'll do the presentation afterwards. There'll be some questions and time for questions. So with that, please help me welcome Chad McWhinney.
Well, thanks for having me today. Anyone in here from Southern California? Great, what part?
San Diego.
San Diego? Great, who else?
Ventura County.
Ventura? Great, anyone else?
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt? Great. I grew up, born and raised in Huntington Beach, California. Moved to Colorado in about 1993, I think is when I came here full time. So pleasure to be here today. How many people know about Centera or been to Centera before? Good, a big show of hands. A lot of people know us related to Centera. We also do a lot of other developments outside of Centera. And I believe that there's a saying that showing is better than telling. So I put together a little PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time walking you through our company, our history, and then things that I've learned about leadership really since I've been in business for the last 20 years or so. For those of you from Southern California, you guys remember we've got a lot of strawberry stands out there, a lot of strawberry fields everywhere. And before getting into the real estate business, my brother Troy and I grew up in Southern California, and I think when I was in 7th grade and my brother Troy was in 5th grade, we started out by selling fresh strawberries at the roadside strawberry stands. In 7th grade, we had one location. And by the time I graduated high school in 1990, we had 14 locations, and then in 1991 we had 28 locations, all the way from San Diego, all the way north up to LA County. And you can see here we would take fresh strawberries from local farmers, put them in the back of our pickup trucks, and sell them at roadside stands. It's changed a little bit today, but it was very important back in the early 90s because if you wanted to buy really fresh fruit, and you bought it at the supermarket, it was typically 3 to 4 days after being picked. And our value proposition was we would let it stay on the vine longer, let it get really red and ripe and juicy. We'd pick it, and then we'd write the time that we picked it. So, you know, you were buying fruit that was picked within 2 or 3 hours instead of 3 or 4 days. And it was a great business, but in the agricultural business, anybody in here in the agricultural business? In the agricultural business, anytime you buy an asset, be it a truck, a piece of equipment, what do you think happens to the value of that asset over time? Depreciates. Over time, what usually happens to the real estate? Appreciates. And Troy and I didn't own any real estate back then. We were just renting locations from local real estate people. And I remember after working in the business for 5 or 6 years and plowing just about every dollar we made back into the business, I said, we really don't have anything to show for it. I mean, all the equipment and everything we bought was worth 20 cents on what we paid for it. But what do you think happened to our rent checks every month? They started to go up, and I remember saying to Troy, I said, we're in the wrong business. We need to be in the asset appreciation business, not the asset depreciation business. And so I read an article in 1993 in Time magazine called Boom Time in the Rockies. DIA was under construction. Everything in red on those charts is Colorado, everything in blue is the rest of the nation. And I said, Colorado seems like a pretty good place to go get in the real estate business. And our family had had a piece of land in Loveland, Colorado that they homesteaded in 1860. Actually 2 different parcels owned by 2 different sides of our family. And our grandmother passed away in December of 1989, and the family made a decision in around 1990-91 to sell the family farms to help pay the inheritance taxes. So my brother Troy and I looked at the property and said, well, we'd like to buy the family farm. And the family went out and had it appraised, actually put it on the market. We had to compete with others. And we said, if we can actually make a decent return farming the property, and we're buying this property as a farm, at some point in time in our future when this becomes prime real estate, because I looked at I-25 and 34, I saw Longmont, Loveland, Fort Collins, and Greeley. Eventually, someday they'd all grow together. And I said, this is in the middle of it all. It's going to be prime real estate. It might be 20, 30 years. But if we could actually make a decent return farming, then all of the real estate value is just gravy. And so we set out and ended up auctioning almost 6,000 acres of land, really from Berthoud all the way up to Loveland, and about half of which is what's known today as Centerra. On the right, you'll see some of the original land grants that our great-great-grandfather received back in 1860, signed by Ulysses S. Grant, Grover Cleveland, and Andrew Johnson. So we've been a part of the Northern Colorado community for many, many years, and consider it very fortunate that we can be living here today. So today, McWhinney is a team of about 55 to 60 associates. We've developed, entitled, and planned about 6,000 acres of land. We still own about 4,500 acres today. We own 16 office, medical, and industrial properties, 5 retail centers, 6 limited service hotels, and 2 apartment communities. And we tend to be long-term owners of real estate, so we tend to develop the real estate, put long-term financing on it, and then build up the cash flow and go from there. It's been a great business. It's been a lot of fun. We have an incredibly talented team of people. And originally I thought I could come talk to you for a long time about real estate, but there's lots of very smart real estate people out there, and I tried to say, what is it that I've learned over the years that's allowed us to be successful in real estate, and thought if I could leave you with anything, maybe it's some of that knowledge that you could apply not just to real estate, but to your lives in general. And these are things that I'm able to attribute a lot of things that have happened to me, both personally and professionally, and look back and say it's because I've learned these different things that we've been able to achieve the success we've had. Our purpose as a company is simple: create great places for people, and our promise is to provide favorable experiences. Anyone in here know Larry Kendall? Anyone ever heard of the group real estate? I think the group sells about half of all the homes in Larimer, Weld County. And Larry is my mentor. He's a personal friend of mine. And he has something that's called the power of vision that he teaches. And he has taught it to me. And I would say outside of my parents, the single person who's had the greatest impact, positive impact on my life over my career has been Larry Kendall. And so I wanted to take a summary of some of the things that he's taught me and share them with you. Larry is a person that reads a book every 2 days. So he reads about 150 to 180 books a year. He's as smart as anyone that I've ever met, and he's really an excellent communicator. There's a saying that Larry has, that success often comes to those who get in front of the inevitable. And in fact, you guys had Dr. Singhi here to speak, didn't you? Dr. Singhi wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. And in the book, he talks about we live in a world of exponential change, that the world is changing faster now than it's ever changed in the history of mankind. And the example that Larry likes to use is that of the lily pond. And this is a picture of a lily pond taken up by Lake Dillon, up by Breckenridge. And if you don't know anything about lily ponds, it doesn't start out as a lily pond. What does it start out as? Just a big body of water. And from the time it starts out as just a body of water, and as the lilies start growing, it doubles in size every day. So on day 1, there's 1 lily. On day 2, there's 2. Day 3, there's more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How many days do you think, assuming it doubles in size every day, how many days do you think it takes to fill up a lily pond until the pond's completely full of lilies? You had to take a guess. 45? What did you say? A month. Takes exactly 30 days. So that means on day 28, it's 25% full. On day 29, it's 50% full. And on day 30, it's 30% full. Now, if you believe that success often comes to those who get in front of the inevitable, when do you think the media usually reports, when do you think the media would report that something's going on here and that a lily pond is being created? What day?
31.
Yeah, day 31, day 29, day 28, etc. Some of the most successful people that I've met in life, both be it personally and professionally, are ones that get in front of the inevitable. When we came to Colorado in 1991 and started buying land at I-25 and 34, the lily pond was day 3, day 4. A lot of people waited until a year ago, 2, 3 years ago, and they have a much different situation than we have because they obviously paid a lot more. I-25 and 34, in terms of being a lily pond, day 30 is today. Some of the most successful people are people that get out there day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. So again, be it anything personally or professionally, if you think about it, and in fact, anyone watch 60 Minutes? Great show for some new business students. It's basically documentary and investigative reporting. And they did an in-depth analysis on the financial crisis, and they said, how did it happen? And obviously, we all know it started in the residential sector, credit default swaps, etc. So there's a gentleman that in the last couple of years has made $20 billion. And personally, for his company and for himself, he's made about $3.5 billion. Do you think he got in front of the inevitable sooner than everyone else? You bet. And they asked him, they sat down, they said, how did you get in front of the inevitable? What did you see that no one else saw? And he's a hedge fund manager. And he was at a wedding reception in Europe. A friend was getting married. And he was sitting next to someone at dinner. And he asked him, what do you do? And the person says, well, I sell credit default swaps. He's really like, what are those? Tell me about it, etc. And he said, well, basically, we take all these subprime mortgages along with really A-rated mortgages. We package them all together so you have a diverse pool of mortgages. We get them AAA rated, and he stopped him right there. He goes, what do you mean you get them AAA rated? How are you able to take subprime mortgages and get them AAA rated? And he goes, don't ask me how it's done, man. He goes, I just know we get them AAA rated and we sell them. And he goes, who's buying these things? And he says, the Asians and the Europeans. And he says, and then when you sell them, what happens? He goes, I don't know. I sold it, I got my commission, I'm done. He goes, what if they don't work out? The guy was like, I don't know. So he gets back to Manhattan, and he goes, you know what, I want to see how they're rating these things AAA. So he goes out and buys a tranche of like 30 mortgages. And he says, give me the bad ones. And they bring in a couple of the bad ones. And he gets on a plane and flies out to California. And there's a subprime mortgage where this guy, I can't remember what city, lives in a $785,000 house. He goes up and he knocks on the door. And the guy answers the door, and no habla inglés. And he's like, what do you do? And long story short, the guy was a strawberry picker making $12,000 a year, and he qualified for a mortgage to live in a $785,000 house. And the guy's like, okay. So he gets back home, and his maid says, oh, I'm so excited. I just bought a house, a house in Queens. And he's like, wow. $700,000-$800,000 house, and he's like, our maid making, $20-some thousand, $30,000 a year. A couple weeks later, he's like, hey, how's that house going? She goes, it's going so good, we bought 3. and he says, 3? He goes, yeah. He goes, the bank called me and said, your house actually ended up appraising for more than we thought, and so we've got additional credit available to you. So she said she got together with one of her other maid friends, and together they bought 2 more homes. And he's like, something's not right here. So he ended up going to You guys familiar with the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch, etc. And says, how are you guys getting these rated AAA? And they walk him through this whole analysis. And the flaw that he saw, that I think we all would have seen it, but again, he got in front of the inevitable, was that the analysis to get AAA rating assumed that real estate would never go down in value. And he's like, well, real estate always goes up and down in value. So then he's like, well, what happens if it goes down in value? And they're like, well, then we all got problems. Okay? So he goes to Lehman Brothers. You guys remember Lehman Brothers? Investment bank, been around a long, long time, now bankrupt. And he sits down with the head of risk management of Lehman Brothers, and he says, how will you, let me give you a presentation on where I think you guys are wrong. And he starts, he's about 20 minutes into an hour-long presentation, and the head of risk management of Lehman Brothers stops the meeting, looks at him and says, you worry about your risk, we'll worry about ours. Escorts him out of the building, and as he's doing that, he puts his arm around him and he says, God, I hope you're wrong. So this guy goes back to his investors and raises $1 billion and says, I think there's a bubble coming in credit default swaps. And shortly thereafter, he started making $10 million a day. Because, well, everyone thought one thing. Now, we all sit here, and I see a lot of heads shaking up and down. Yeah, it's pretty easy now. You look at it and say, oh, yeah, duh. Yeah, if we were to go raise $1 billion in short credit default swaps, no, it's too late. The lily pond's now full. So again, personally or professionally, whatever you can do to get in front of the inevitable, you will tend to have the most success. Why do groups form? Why do people get together? Why do people go to dinner with other people instead of by themselves? Any ideas? Speak up.
Wealth of information.
Wealth of information? And good? Anyone else? What was that?
I said different perspectives.
Different perspectives? I like to call it synergy. The reason people get together is because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? It's more fun to go to the movies with someone else than by yourself. It's more fun to do homework with someone else than it is by yourself. You've also got to have energy. And when you take synergy and energy and you put it together, what do you get? What's that? Yeah. You get alignment. Okay, basically, we've all seen, look at the Rockies. Do the Colorado Rockies have the biggest payroll? No? In fact, I think their payroll is $78 million a year, and the Yankees are $200 and some million a year. But they were able to take a lot of really good players, get a lot of synergy and energy going, and when you have synergy and energy, you have alignment. So here's an example, and this is really important for me because when I met Larry Kendall and we were at McWhinney, we were probably a team of about 15 people. We had a lot of synergy, a lot of energy, a lot of passion, but we did not have alignment. We had a lot of people in the company going in a lot of different directions, and as a result, our results weren't what they needed to be. And Larry sat down and he said, it's not that you guys don't have passion. You guys are working as 15 individual people, and you need to learn how to work as 15 people together. So this is a wave. And what happens when you take two waves that are moving in the same direction and you put them together? It creates a much bigger wave. Any musicians in the room? What instrument do you play? Voice? Violin? You know that you could take two equally tuned guitars, put them in this room, and if they're perfectly tuned, and you move one of the strings on one of the guitars, the identical string on the guitar across the room will vibrate at the exact same time. And that's because they're perfectly tuned and in sync. Obviously, if they're not tuned and in sync, then they can't do that. And so what happens, let's say you take two waves that are going the opposite directions, and you put them together, what happens? You sing. And this is one of the most powerful things that I learned in life, but also in business, that you can have lots of energy and lots of passion. And for those of you entrepreneurs that want to start your own business someday, or when you're within an organization, I would say as CEO of McWhinney, the most important thing that I do is obviously try to find talent and make sure they have the resources they need, but that talent is all working towards the same goal. Because when everyone starts working together, we get into that large wave on top. So growing up, my dad always told me you need to work harder. Anyone heard that before? And it's important. You definitely have to work harder. Definitely have to work smarter. But what's the most important? Learning how to work together. Some of the most successful people I know work 3 days a week. A friend of mine got voted by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 CEOs in America. And he works 2.5 days a week. He said, one of the problems I had, Chad, is when I worked 5 days a week, everyone came to me to solve problems. And he goes, now they know that every Thursday and Friday I take off and I'm gone and not to bother me unless it's an emergency. And it really teaches them how to get together as a team and start solving things and working together. Anyone ever, you guys are familiar with the Chicago Bulls? Anyone know who Phil Jackson is? Coach of the LA Lakers, before the Lakers coached the Chicago Bulls. There's a book out there called the Second Jungle Book. And it was interesting, Phil Jackson took over as the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, and when he did, they never won a major championship basketball game. They had Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, some of the best players in the world, but they never won a major championship. And when he got hired as head coach, he said, we don't need any new talent. This isn't a talent issue. We've got the best talent in the world. He said, the problem is we have 5 individual players that don't know how to play together. It's all about me. It's all about me. And he put this up in the locker room, and it says, now this is the law of the jungle. It's old and as true as the sky, and the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break it must die. As the creeper that girdles the tree trunk, the law runneth forward and back, for the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. Shortly thereafter, they went to win 5 straight championship games in a row, lost a couple, came back and won a 6th. LA Lakers hired them, and what happened with the Lakers? Same thing. They go on and end up winning a couple championships as well. So, a great example of how to work together as a team and what happens when you can work together. So, as much as there's positive alignment, there's also negative alignment. What are some ways to get negative alignment? Create an enemy. What else? Create a crisis. Now, if a group of people has an enemy, if a group of people has a crisis, of course, they're going to get aligned really quick. The problem with negative alignment is what? People get burned out. If it's always a crisis, if there's always a crisis going on, people get burned out. So I like to tend to focus on positive alignment. And how do you get positive alignment? One is to have shared values. Another is to have a shared vision. Another is to have a common working philosophy. Another is to share the rules of the game. And number 5 is obviously to share commitments. So I want to talk for a second about the power of vision and how important that is. There's a quote in the Bible that says, without vision, the people would perish. Vision's been around a long time. And you guys familiar with Helen Keller? Helen Keller was once asked if she could think of anything worse than being blind. Yes, she said, being able to see but having no vision. And so Obviously, when you go to create positive alignment and you get people working together towards a common goal, etc., you have to create a vision statement. And this is probably one of the most important things I learned, and it's so simple, but there's a saying out there, what you focus on expands. And in a vision statement, if one of the goals is to get people to rally behind it and work together, there's a few things that I'll leave you with that will be the difference of whether or not you're going to have an impact. The first is you've got to make it bold. When people do bold things and say bold things, that's one way to get positive alignment. The next is you have to be passionate about your vision. The third is you always want to keep it in the positive, and I'll talk about that later. The fourth is you want to make it measurable. And why do you want to make it measurable?
So you know if you achieve it.
Exactly. How will you know when you've succeeded if you don't make it measurable? And the last is you want to make it written. And just remember these 5 simple things, and as the presentation goes on, you'll see why. So I'm going to give you an example here of, and I've served on lots of different boards and organizations, and how many times have you seen people put out a vision statement that says, we want to be a better company? Or sometimes I've been with Larry before talking to students, and Larry will point to someone and he say, what do you want? And most of the time, when you ask someone what they want, they will respond by telling you what they don't want. I've seen a student say to Larry, quite frankly, I don't want to live like this anymore. Or another person said, I want to be debt-free. And Larry said, no, you don't want to be debt-free. You want to be what? Free and clear. You don't want to live like this anymore. That's not what I asked you. I asked you, what do you want? And they responded with what they didn't want. And I'm going to talk in a second about why that's important. So these are a couple examples of what not to do. This is the vision statement of the Fort Collins Economic Development Task Force many years back in the 80s. They said, our vision is to create a healthy economy reflecting the values of our unique community in a challenging world. Is it bold, passionate, measurable, positive, written? Some of those, yes. Do you get inspired when you see that? How will you know if you've succeeded? This doesn't create a lot of alignment. Or how about this one? This is the former vision statement of the Larimer County Medical Partnership. To build a community-based, collaborative, public-private, not-for-profit Medicaid model that is better than the current system. This is an actual vision statement. Do you think this creates a lot of alignment and people working together toward a common goal? Do you think this is going to produce a lot of great results? Probably not. Anyone know who this gentleman is? Legend, really. W.D. Farr. One of the original organizers of the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy. This is an example of the right vision statement. By 1960, we will have completed a system of tunnels, reservoirs, and water rights that will move 500,000 acre-feet of water from the western slope to the eastern slope of the Colorado Continental Divide. Is it bold? It's bold today. Think of it back in the early 1900s. Is it passionate? Is it measurable? Is it positive? And is it written? Or how about this one? John F. Kennedy, President, 1961. We will, by the end of this decade, put a man on the moon and bring him home safely again. I was born in 72, so I wasn't around then, but my mom remembers driving in her car when the president came over the radio and said, we're going to the moon. And she said she stopped her car and got goosebumps up and down her body. Do you think it was bold, passionate, measurable, written, positive, etc.? What a lot of people don't know is after President Kennedy said this, a group of scientists came in to meet with him afterwards, and this group later became the start of NASA. And they said, Mr. President, with all due respect, we don't know how to go to the moon. And Kennedy responded with, we choose to go to the moon not because it will be easy, but because it will be hard. And then does anyone know what he said next? He said, the vision comes first, the how-to will follow. More often than not, most people will not put out a bold, passionate, measurable, positive written vision until they figured out how to do it. And that's the backwards way. So many people are afraid to put something out there until they know how to do it. And Kennedy, he didn't know. Do you think in 1961 he knew or anyone knew how we were going to the moon? Research has shown that less than 10% of the technology needed to go to the moon existed in 1961. But what did Kennedy know? He knew that the vision came first, and once he put that vision out there, and if you believe that what we focus on expands, he got an entire nation, and quite frankly an entire world, focusing on what? Going to the moon by 1970. So what started happening? People started thinking, well, what if we did this? Well, if we did this, maybe it would work this way. Well, if we had this resource, then we could do this. And we ended up going to the moon and being the first person on the moon. Anyone know who Roger Spear is? Besides that 1981 top tech professor? He won the Nobel Prize in 1981. And does anyone know why he won? Roger Spear was asked in the late 70s to determine what percent of the human brain we use. And he took a couple years and did a bunch of research, and what do you think his research showed? What percent of the human brain do we use?
10.
10%? Anyone else?
5%.
5%? Roger determined that the brain has unlimited capacity. And so if you have unlimited capacity, then what percent do you think we use? Infinite. He said, I can't determine a percentage because as far as I can tell, the human brain has unlimited capacity. There's no limits on the human brain. And he discovered what's known as the reticular activating system. Anyone know what this is? It's amazing. Larry Kendall and I share a goal, a vision, that every student, before they graduate high school, will be required to take a class on the reticular activating system. I wish I would have known about this when I graduated high school. The reticular activating system, it's the size of your index finger. It's right above your neck, in the lower part of your brain. And it's basically, think of it as a huge Google search engine. And it does two things and two things only. What do you think that is? So if it's a search engine, what's it searching for? For what? What type of information? It searches for what you want, and it also searches for what? What you don't want. That's all it does. It's always out there searching 24/7. Someone out there said we have 30,000 thoughts a day or something as a human mind. It's always searching, and it only searches for what you want and what you don't want. It's always searching for what you want, value, and love, and it's searching for what you don't want, what you fear and threat. So if you believe that what you focus on expands, what do you think happens if it's always searching for what you don't want, fear, and threat? What do you think you get? And what happens if it focuses on what you want, love, and value? This worked great. I was driving down to Denver once with Larry Kendall, and a Lexus car drove by. And out of nowhere, he's like, wow, look at that Lexus. And I was like, where? Oh, yeah, cool. What was it that made him say, wow, look at that Lexus, and I didn't even know it drove by? That was his reticular activating system at work. Did he know a Lexus was going to come driving by? No. But subconsciously, it's always searching. Whether you know it or not, your reticular activating system, every human in the world has it. It's always searching for wants and don't wants, 24/7. And when it sees something that it wants, it lets you know. And when it comes across something you don't want, it also lets you know. So Roger Spear determined that the human brain has no limits. And he said, what you focus on expands. So what's the good news? What you focus on expands. What's the bad news? What you focus on expands. And if you guys would take a second, you guys pass a few of these out. Everyone just take a washer. And in what I handed out, you'll see a circle with 4 numbers on it. If you'd open that up and then take the washer out, and when everyone's done, I'll walk you through it. And you guys are free to keep the washers and the paper and stuff. So you need a piece of paper? Everyone else get a piece of paper? Cool, it looks like everyone is close or has their washer. So take that the paper with the 1, 2, 3, and 4, and lean your head, go and sit down, but lean your head where your nose is directly over the center of the page. And then take the very tip of the string and hold it right below your nose and keep the washer above the paper. And try to keep the washer from moving. Just leave it right in the middle of the paper. Relax. And then I want you to start thinking the numbers 1, 3, 1, 3. So stay very relaxed. Don't move the washer. Don't let the washer move, but start thinking subconsciously in your mind 1, 3, 1, 3. And then go ahead and start thinking 2, 4, 2, 4. So again, don't let the washer move, but just think to yourself 2, 4, 2, 4. Usually about 70% of the people out there, the washer will move how they're thinking subconsciously. That's the best way I know of to show you that you have a reticular activating system, and that's how it works. So even though you're not trying to move the washer, because your mind is thinking something, your body will gravitate towards that, whether you know it or not. So again, you guys go ahead and keep that, show it to your friends or family. So you can see now why it's important to state your vision in the positive, and also to make your vision measurable. When you say, I want to be debt-free, what are you focusing on? You're focusing on debt. When you say, I want to be free and clear, you're focusing on the positive. Any golfers in the room? Most people, when they stand up to hit the golf shot, what do you think they're thinking to themselves? Where's the ball normally go? Maybe they should try this. I would encourage you, next time you're playing golf, try this. Subconsciously think, where do you want the ball to go? So say the ball is going to go on the green, the ball is going to go in the hole, etc. You interview Tiger Woods. He's been through a tremendous amount of sports psychology. Jeremy Bloom's a good friend of mine. A lot of other athletes are. And it's amazing that a lot of the Olympic athletes will tell you what got them to the Olympics is not their physical ability. He said there's lots of people in this world with incredible physical abilities. What got them there was the ability to learn how the reticular activating system works, and that's what gave them the difference to become an Olympic athlete. So Roger Sperry said you can do anything, just not everything at once. And this is a picture that I like to put out there, because as you create your vision statement, you've got to really be able to have what I call the eye of the tiger. Don't throw out 20 vision statements. Because what's going to happen is you're going to start focusing on so many things, you're not going to be effective. Pick one or two things that you really want, focus on it, and watch what happens. So there's 3 steps that I like to follow. The first is you've got to have a vision, and we've talked about that before. The second is you've got to be able to share that vision, which I'll talk about in a second. And then the third is being able to focus on it. So in the year 2000, and I saw that you guys have the Wall Street Journal out there. How many people read that every day? Good. Well, if I had to pick one newspaper to read daily, it would be the Wall Street Journal. In the year 2000, they asked the top CEOs in America what single individual has had the greatest positive impact on mankind. Who do you think the #1 response was? This is so from 1900 to the year 2000, top CEOs in America. Who was the single individual that had had the greatest impact, positive impact on mankind in the last 100 years? Who? Ford. Ford's one. Who else? Gandhi. Anyone else? Thomas Edison. Why was Thomas Edison picked? What is Thomas Edison famous for? The light bulb. He brought us what? Energy? Electricity? Thomas Edison had a saying, anything the mind can conceive and believe, they can achieve. And think where the world would be today without electricity. It'd be very different. In 1953, the Yale University graduating class decided to do an experiment. I want to walk you guys through it. They asked the graduating class in 1953 a set of questions. And then they wanted to go back, I think it was 20 years later, and see what happened. The first question they asked everyone in the graduating class is, do you set goals? Yes or no? The next question they asked them is, do you write them down? Yes or no? The next is, do you have a plan to achieve this? Yes or no? And only 3% of the graduating class answered yes to all 3 questions. Then they decided to go back 20 years later and do a follow-up study. And what they found is the 3% that answered yes were the most successful. The 3% were the most healthy. And the 3% controlled 97% of the net worth of all the other graduates. True story. Go research it online if you want to learn more about it. So one of my jobs as a CEO is to take a vision, which I've always just naturally, I kind of live in the future, if you will, but what I learned is having a vision is one thing, but if you really want to accomplish some incredible things with a team of people, you have to be able to share that vision with them. And Larry taught me there's 5 things that every human being in the world will go through before they will share a vision. And so if you're trying to get a new customer to work with you, you're trying to get your parents to agree with you, whatever it is, if you want someone to share your vision, you go through this 5-step process, and if you can answer yes to all 5, they will share your vision. The first thing that people will do before they share your vision is they will say to themselves, is what this person is saying in alignment with my philosophy and my values? What's more important to someone than their philosophy and values? Nothing. If someone says something that's not in alignment with your philosophy or your values, you're probably not going to share their vision. So let's talk about an example. How many people have been to Disneyland? What's the one thing that Disneyland can do? And they can start it tomorrow, and after tax, it would put $150 million to the bottom line of Disney annually, immediately. But they don't do it because it would violate their philosophy and values. Alcohol. Selling alcohol at Disneyland. Why? Why don't they do it? If you look at some of the interviews with Walt Disney when Disneyland was created, he said, we're creating the magic kingdom and it's going to be the happiest place on earth. And we're not going to sell cigarettes, we're not going to sell alcohol. Even today, it could generate $150, $200 million a year of after-tax free cash flow if all they did was put Coors Light stands everywhere. But they don't do it because it was violating their philosophy and values. So do you think if Mike Leisner or whoever the CEO is now came back from a retreat and figured out how we're going to make more money and went to 80,000 employees at the Walt Disney Company and said, we're selling Coors Light at Disneyland, you think 80,000 people would share that vision? Probably not. Assuming people share your philosophy and your values, the next thing they're going to say is, okay, does this person have tactics and a plan? I mean, it's great they have a vision. It's great that I'm in alignment with the philosophy and the values. But do they actually have a plan, or are they just saying it? If someone they don't have to have a very detailed plan, but they have to be able to give you a general idea of how this is going to work. And then you'll continue shaking your head yes. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, well, what's in it for me? I'm in alignment with the philosophy and values. I think you've got a plan on how to do it. What's in it for me? Maybe it's if we hit this level of net profit, everyone gets a 10% raise. Maybe it's if we do this, you get promoted. Maybe if it's we do this, you get ownership. Whatever it is, there's got to be something in it for the person. And if they can, if you can solve that, they will continue shaking their head yes. The next thing they will look for is commitment. So let's pretend I'm a manager of a company, and the ownership team invites me up to Estes Park to a retreat, lays out this new vision, and I don't buy into it. But you know what? I'm not the owner of the company. I don't make the rules. And I go back, and all of you are my workers. And then you guys say, what happened up at Estes Park? And I say, we got this vision. Quite frankly, guys, it's BS. I don't believe in it. I don't share it. But I'm not the owner of the company, and I need you to get behind it, and this is what we're going to do. Are you going to share that vision? Why? Because you look at me and you see that I'm not committed to it. So when someone's sharing a vision with you, if you sense that they're not committed to that vision, you will not share it. And the last thing is communication. They have to constantly be talking about it. President Kennedy constantly talked about putting a man on the moon. How many people here have been involved in an organization where you go away and you have this big strategic planning retreat and you come up with some goals, and a year later at the strategic planning retreat, someone's like, hey, what do we do with those goals? And they go to the closet and they pull out some paper and they put them up on the wall and say, oh yeah, this is what we agreed to last year. If you go to McWhinney, you will see our purpose and our promise in every conference room. And every supervisor that I work with, in their office, they have a written list of the 5 most critical things that we as a company need to accomplish in the next 90 days. And the 5 most critical things that we need to accomplish in the next 12 months. And every time I meet with them, daily, we review that list. And what's on that list is positive, measurable, written, etc. This doesn't just apply to work, it applies to your personal life as well. Create a list of what you want to do, places you want to go, people you want to meet, books you want to read, etc. And just like the washer exercise, when you get up every morning, read your list. And watch what happens during the day to your reticular activating system. I want to talk for a second about the power of focus. And has anyone ever heard of the net forward energy ratio? How does a plane take off? What are 2 things you need to have, main things you need to have besides an airplane and wings and stuff to take off? Lift and thrust. Or lift and drag creates, thrust and drag creates lift. So let's pretend that you've got 60% thrust, 40% drag. Start to lift off. Your net forward energy ratio is 1.5. Let's pretend this is an organization that 60% of the people say we're going in this direction, and 40% of the people say, I don't think so. What do you think the results are going to be? 1.5. What happens if you can get 80% of the organization to start working together towards a shared vision, and only 20% don't buy into that vision? What's your net forward energy ratio? 4. All we did was go from 60% alignment to 80% alignment, and this works for your individual human brains too. Your net forward energy ratio is 4. What happens if you get to 90% alignment? What's your net forward energy ratio? Again, all we did was go from 80% alignment to 90%, and our output went from 4.5 to 9. This is a great example of the Colorado Rockies. I remember when they went to the World Series a few years ago. And then what happens when you get 100% alignment? What is that? Infinite. That happens to be the logo of our company. We spent 15 years trying to come up with a logo. We'd hire all these graphic artists, and they'd produce a cool M or all these things. And Troy and I would be like, that's cool, but what does it mean? And so we went for like 15 years without a logo. We just said McWhinney. And finally, when I met Larry Kendall, and we saw this, someone said, well, that's what we're about, no limits. And so that became the logo of McWhinney. That's how strongly we believe in the power of focus and the power of alignment. And what happens when you get 100% alignment? A lot of Olympic athletes will tell you that's when miracles happen. What's the definition of a miracle? Anyone know? It's an event that happens well beyond the ordinary. And there's a few examples that I'd like to show you about what happens when you get 100% alignment, either with your brain or with a group of people. The first is Cliff Young. Anyone know who Cliff Young is? Any runners in the room? One. In Australia, there's a race. You guys have heard of the Leadville 100? It's a 100-mile race here in Colorado. In Australia, they have the equivalent of that, but it's a 500-mile run. Individual run, start to finish, first person wins. They've been doing it for years, and most of the people that try out for this and win it are 18 to 20, young 20s. They're all sponsored by Nike and Reebok and some of the best runners, running companies in the world. And on the day of the race a couple years ago, a gentleman by the name of Cliff Young shows up. He's my age, mid-30s. Shows up in his work boots, jeans, says, I'd like to run the race. And the organizers are like, are you serious? And they said, what makes you think you're qualified to run this race? He said, well, you see, I'm a sheep herder, and I come from a very poor family, and we don't have enough resources to buy a vehicle. And so sometimes I have to go 2 to 3 to 4 days of herding large amounts of sheep without sleeping. And I cover 400 or 500 miles at a time. I think I can run this race. And they go, okay. So he signs up for the race in his kind of work clothes and everything. This is the day of the race, and they shoot the gun, and everyone takes off, and he gets laughed at by everyone. He's not the first out of the gate. Everyone takes off, and he starts running. 5 days later, he crosses the finish line in first place. And after it was over, they gave him his $10,000 check, and he didn't want it. He goes, give it to second and third place. I didn't do this for the money. And they said, what's up? How'd you do it? What Cliff didn't realize, he didn't know you were allowed to stop and sleep. So all the best runners in the world would run for 18 hours. They would sleep for 6, wake up, run for 18 hours. His reticular activating system didn't know you were allowed to stop and sleep. So what do you think his mind focused on? Run until you finish. Whereas everyone else was saying, I got to run for 4 more hours, and then I got to sleep for a couple of days. So go look him up on the internet. It's a pretty amazing story. That's a great example of what happens when you focus on something you want. Anyone ever heard of John Goddard? Goddard's list? 2020 did a documentary on him years ago. When he was in grade school, the teacher asked all the students in the class to make a bucket list, a life list, of all the things they wanted to do in life before they died. And he sat down and basically wrote a list. He said he wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. He wanted to climb Mount Everest. He wanted to swim the English Channel, and all these just incredible things. And what did he do? He spent the better part of his life doing all of those. And every morning he would get up and he'd look at a list of all the things he said he was going to do in life, and his reticular activating system would just start figuring out ways to make it happen. Miss Heather Whitestone, Miss America 1995. Why is this special? First disabled person to ever win the Miss America pageant. Heather is legally deaf, and in fact, she had to go to school in Denver to a speech therapy school, and it took her 6 years to learn how to pronounce her last name. But one of her dreams in life, and she said, look, if it took me 6 years to learn how to pronounce my last name, then I'm going to try out for the Miss America pageant. She did. But if she's deaf, and you know, what's one of the things you have to be able to do to win the Miss America pageant? Sing?
Answer questions.
Answer questions, but you can do that through sign language or something else. You also have to be able to dance. And they asked her, and she aced her dance competition. And they said, how are you able to ace it if you can't hear? And she said, I just danced to the vibration. She could feel the vibrations of the music. And she learned how to dance to the vibrations of the music. What was interesting is after she won, there was protesters outside protesting, not against the Miss America pageant. They were protesting against Heather. Why? Because they claimed that she was showing that being deaf is not a handicap. That it's that just because you're deaf, you can still win a Miss America pageant, you can still live a normal, healthy life, etc. And they were upset at her for doing it. If you get some time, go to Google and Google when she won. It's amazing. Kathy Lee Gifford announced who the winner was, and again, you know, she can't hear. So they announced it was her, and she just stood there, and she saw everyone excited, and they came up with the crown and everything, and she realized it was her. So. Bill Clinton. When he was about 16 years old, he wanted to go to the White House, and his mom arranged for him to go meet President Kennedy. And someone took this picture. And Mr. Clinton will tell you that ever since that day that picture was taken, he used to carry it in his pocket. And ever since he was 16 years old, he would tell his mom, when people would ask him, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to do? He said, I'm going to be President of the United States. No hesitation, no whatsoever. He said, I'm going to be President of the United States. Do you think carrying that picture around every day and looking at it every day through your life and your reticular activating system focusing on becoming President of the United States has something to do with him becoming President of the United States? Probably so. Anyone know Chris Kluge from Colorado? Lives up in Snowmass, Aspen. Won the 2002 bronze medal in the 2002 Olympics. What people don't know about Chris is that 18 months before he won the bronze medal in the Olympics, he got diagnosed with a serious illness and needed a liver transplant, and they took him to Denver Hospital, University Hospital in Denver. And said the bottom line is 18 months ago, he was lying on a hospital bed, flayed open, jaundiced, and circling the drain. Today he's on the podium. They interviewed his doctors and his nurses. And every day he would get up in crutches, etc., and go to the gym. And people would ask him, his nurses would come in and say, you know, what are you doing, Chris? Why are you going to the gym? He said, I need to train for the Olympics. And they brought in a sports psychologist, etc., and sat down with him and said, I'm sorry, not a sports psychologist, a psychologist, and said, Chris, you know, we don't know how to tell you this, but you're going to be lucky if you live. And you're not, I mean, we don't even know if we can get you a liver. You're not going to be in the Olympics in 18 months. And he said, I'm going to the Olympics. Do you think his recovery had anything to do with him focusing on where he was going instead of what he couldn't do? Bill Farr, who we've obviously talked about. Do you think the reason that Greeley has more water than probably anyone in the world has something to do with W.D. Farr? Do you think, a lot of people could have said there's no way you could get water from the western slope over the Greeley. But he was someone that, again, tended to focus on what they want instead of what they didn't want. Here's 10-year-old Rudy Garcia Tolson. He's a little bit older now, but he has a saying, life without limitations. He does triathlons. He runs, bikes, swims, become great friends with a bunch of celebrities, etc. After one of the races, the reporter came up and said, Rudy, why do you run races? And his simple answer was, because I can. Most people in his situation would probably think to themselves they could never do a triathlon. Do you remember 16-year-old Sarah Hughes in the early 2000 Olympics? Who was the skater that got hurt? Was it Christine Yamaguchi? Yeah, well, she got hurt, but there was someone else got hurt. I think it was Christine Yamaguchi got hurt at the Olympics. I remember watching it on TV where she hurt herself and couldn't finish. She went to the Olympics as an alternate. And anyone remember seeing this? She actually aced the performance. I think she got perfect 6s or 10s or whatever it was. But it was interesting, after it was over, she was being interviewed by Katie Couric on one of the shows. And they played a videotape of her when she was like 9 years old in a little competition. And after the competition was over, the reporter came up and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And her response was, she said, I'm going to win a gold medal in figure skating in the Olympics at like 9 years old. And again, that's an example of when we focus on expands. From a very, very young age, she knew exactly what it was that she wanted to accomplish, and she focused on that, not what she couldn't do. This is Eric in Boulder, blind, yet he's climbed 7 of the highest peaks in the world. Now most people, not being blind, would tell you it'd be difficult to go climb Mount Everest. Again, he's showing that just because he has a disability doesn't mean he can't go climb the highest peaks in the world. And it's back to what Thomas Edison said, anything the mind can see, believe, and achieve, or see and believe it can achieve. This is my friend Larry Kendall. Larry came to Fort Collins when he was 27 years old. Economy was pretty bad back then. I think it was in the 77. And what do you do when you can't get a job? So real estate. So we decided to create, with a couple of other equal partners, the group. And today they're responsible for 50% of all residential real estate transactions in Larimer and Weld County. And the National Association of Realtors recently ranked them the most successful real estate brokerage company in America. Larry teaches, what I'm teaching to you guys today, Larry teaches to his company every Wednesday for 2 to 3 hours. Do you think it has something, his teaching has something to do with the fact that their agents average 34 transactions per agent per year, while the national average is 9? There are hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of income, extra income per person at the group, that I can directly attribute to people following Larry's teachings. This is Tom Slocum in the 1991 Boston Marathon. And on the right are the 3 fastest runners in the world, or 5 fastest runners in the world. On the left is Tom. What you don't realize is they start the disabled runners out the night before. And I put this up here because look at the smile on Tom's face and look at the expressions on the other people's face. Again, a lot of people in Tom's situation would tend to focus on what they couldn't do. Any Rotarians in the room? James Bomer was a businessman, actually I think he was a lawyer, that went to Asia in 1985. And while he was there, he went to a village. And he saw a lot of children that were not walking, but were crawling around on their hands and knees. And he asked some people, he said, what's going on? And they said, well, these children have polio. This is 1985. He said, polio? The salt vaccine. In America, when you're born, you get the salt vaccine. It costs a couple dollars. And they said, well, we don't have access to the salt vaccine here in a third world country. And he was absolutely blown away. So he did some research and he found out that in 1985, 1.3 million people, mainly young children, worldwide were being diagnosed with polio. And there's a simple shot when you get at birth and you won't develop polio. And again, anything the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And he set a vision, a very bold, passionate, measurable, written vision. And he said, we will be polio, the world will be polio-free by 2005. He thought about it and he said, over a 20-year period, I think I can organize it in such a way that we can rid the world of polio. And he teamed up with Rotary, and that was his global way to solve polio. And in 2005, I looked up how many documented cases there were of polio worldwide, and there was 1,100. Do you think it had something, again, to do with his reticular activating system and the fact that he focused on, again, what he knew was possible instead of saying, ah, it's not my problem, or let someone else fix it, or there's no way to do too much work? Anyone know who Dick and Rick Hoyt are? Tell people. Pretty amazing story. Dick, the father, spent 29 years in the military, and their son, Ricky, was born severely disabled. In fact, the doctor said he's going to need to go to a special home, special school. He's going to be in pretty bad shape for the rest of his life. And his parents said no, he's going to live at home. He's going to go to public schools, etc. And I can't remember how old it was, but they wanted him to be able to communicate because he can't talk. And they built him a special computer so he could communicate. And they all took bets on what the first words out of his mouth were going to be. Mom said he's going to say, hi, Mom. Dad said he's going to say, hi, Dad. First words out of his mouth, computer, or go Bruins. And it was interesting. There was a local race, and his dad signed him up for the race, the two of them, and they went and did this. It was a 5-mile race. A lot of people didn't even think they'd finish to the end of the street. And they finished the 5-mile race, finished second to last. And when it was over, he communicated, and he said, thanks, Dad. When we were out there today, I didn't feel handicapped. And his dad was just like, wow. So his dad said, you know what, if that's what it takes for my son not to feel handicapped, then we're going to do this full time. So he retired from the military and decided to start trying out for marathons, triathlons, etc. And they set a goal to qualify and compete in the Ironman in Hawaii. Is anyone familiar with the Ironman in Hawaii? It's probably one of the hardest races in the world. Where you have to bike, you have to swim 2.4, 2.5, bike 1:14, and then run a marathon. And you have to do it in under 20 hours. So he decides to sign up for it, and there's a video that is on here. And again, it's a great example of the reticular activating system and how the mind works. So I'll show it with you, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. You gotta watch the fast version.
can only imagine when that day comes, when I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I do is forever, forever worship you. Only imagine. Only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, wanna wear my heart feel. Will I dance for you, Jesus? Will in all you be still? Will I stand in your presence? To my knees, or will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only when all I do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine.
So the reason I always like to finish with this and put this up there is because so many times people think about all the things that they can't do. And hopefully by seeing some of these miracles, you can see that, and you've heard it before, I heard it growing up, anything's possible, etc. But hopefully I've been able to show you that when you focus on expanding, it's your life. You focus on the negative, you'll get negative things, and if you decide to focus on what you want, positive, you'll get it. So with that, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Yes?
So you said that in your conference rooms you have goals you want to accomplish in 90 days and things you want to accomplish in 12 months. Do you have any longer term goals that you set?
We do. We try to be, I like to follow the Rockefeller habits. And longer term goals, they're probably more general. So we want to create great places for people. We want to provide enabled experiences. And we have ways that we measure that. But then specifically how we do that, that's what we focus on over the next 90 days and 12 months. But then personally, I have the places I want to go, the books I want to read, the people I want to meet, etc. Like any bikers in the room? Road bikers, I biked the top of Mount Evans this year. There was a big race called the Climb to the Summit. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but every year I try to do something that's very hard physically. And so a couple years ago, I water skied from the Queen Mary in Long Beach to Catalina Island and back. It was 63 miles in the open ocean. And that was probably physically the hardest thing I've done. But once a year, I put something down that I'm going to do. And all year long, my mind just starts figuring out how to do it. So, what other questions do people have? Yeah.
What was your first big real estate deal development project? How did you get started with that as far as money goes?
Good question. The first real estate deal was probably the Outlet Club, and that was in 19, probably 92 or 93. How we got started in real estate was we were buying farmland at agricultural prices, but we didn't have the money to buy it, so we put options on the property. And then, luckily for us, we were able to be looking back at the bottom, and then those options had fixed prices. It'd be like putting an option on Microsoft stock when it was at $5, and being able to buy it for 6 years at $5, and as the price kept going up and up and up, we had a fixed $5 strike price. And so by the time we had to close on that farmland, it had gone up so much in value, it gave us instant equity, and then we were able to use that equity to start doing real estate development. But for those of you that want to get into real estate but maybe don't have capital now, now's a great time to go talk to banks. They've got a lot of troubled projects, and maybe you could become their partner. Maybe you could agree on a price of the asset and think above it and you split with them or something. There's never been a better time in real estate in my career to get into it than is what's starting to happen right now over the next 24 months. Any other questions or comments?
Just real quick, you mentioned when you guys were about 15 employees or thereabouts, that you guys were going in all different directions. So what did you guys do to kind of refocus, and what led to that?
Has anyone ever read the question was, years ago we had 15 people and we were going different directions. What did we do to fix that? And has anyone ever read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins? If I had to recommend you read one book, I'd probably tell you two. I'd tell you Now Discover Your Strengths by Marcus Buckingham and Good to Great by Jim Collins. And basically what we did is we got the wrong people off the bus. Or Jim Collins says, get the right people on the bus, get the bus headed in the right direction, make sure the people are sitting in the right seats. And we had to let go of some people. We had some people that either were in the wrong seats or they were just the wrong people. They didn't share the vision and passion that we had for the company and where we wanted it to go. Got the right people on the bus and then really started working together. We brought in a lady by the name of Jonna out of Fort Collins, who's an organizational development coach. And she spent a lot of time teaching us how to work together as a team. And we did a lot of that type of stuff.
I'd like to thank Chad McWhinney for being here, sharing his expertise and his vision. I'm Lynn Karofsky, again, the Director of the Monfort Executive Professor Program. We'd like to thank him. We've designated Chad as a Monfort Executive Professor Speaker. We've got a little plaque or a chart or a base that can sit on for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Chad's been on the Dean's Leadership Circle here for many years now, sits on Board of Trustees at CSU. We've been fortunate this semester. We've had an opportunity to take a look at leadership skills from executives in northern Colorado and those who have been here. Roland Stacy, who is the CEO of Poudre Valley Health Systems, has shared his vision to make PVHS a world-class health system. We saw and had the opportunity to hear from Jim Jorstead, an accountant to the stars, Randy Watkins, who comes back as an accountant and a leader in the accountancy industry and here in Colorado as well. We see, again, just the success coming back here in northern Colorado. So hopefully throughout the semester we've had an opportunity to be able to learn some of the, not only the leadership skills and styles, but certainly the vision that Chad has shared with us today. Again, on behalf of, and appreciate Crystal Torrey making the arrangements to have this fine class here today. On behalf of the Monfort College of Business, the Executive Professor Program, again, I'd like to thank Chad McWhinney.
Thank you. I would just ask all of you, there's a, in the handout there, whenever I talk to students, I just ask a couple questions. If you just fill it out really quickly, you don't need to put your name if you don't want it. And then just tear them off and hand them to me as you walk out of the room.